Hi, I am talking today to Ari Block. I met Ari actually through being a guest on his podcast, Story Samurai, and we had such a fantastic conversation. I mean, maybe you're like that with everyone, Ari. My guess is that you are, but I basically walked away saying, like, I have a new friend, which
This is
is
true.
cool because we just really vibed on issues related to storytelling, parenting,
Yes,
and now we were just talking about AI, which I've become completely obsessed with because you have to be, because that's the future.
this is true.
So you're either obsessed or you're going to get left behind, is how I look at it.
Very
Anyway,
accurately put.
Ari, thank you so much for being on the show.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much for having me today. And I'm going to turn
So
off my phone so it doesn't interfere.
yeah, don't interfere, phone. So I would love to just start with your story with the Story Samurai and how
Oh.
that got started and like why an interest in stories.
So it's a sad story, or at least it starts off as one. So I'm working for this company and had this huge success. Basically, Dropbox, which we're a small startup, Dropbox is large companies, like, we love what you're doing. We want you to present to the executive team. Huge, huge, huge success. And I get on the phone next day with the CEO who asked me to meet, like, oh, can we talk in 15 minutes? I'm like, that's never good. And he says, you're both, so it's me and the other VP. He's like, you're both being let go, effective immediately. And your last task is to fire the rest of the team.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So in that process, I basically find a job for each and every one of the employees. We were about a team of 10. So help them with their LinkedIn, help them with their CV, help them with like automatic marketing, set up a few meetings, called a lot of favors. I'm like, hey, like, I have a really good team. It's not their fault. Totally, the chief revenue officer messed up. This is totally his fault. They need a job. He overextended, ran out of money, the usual story. And at this stage, I've helped everybody. And then one of the salespeople is like, oh, Ari, you must have found a job already. And I'm like, actually, no. I took care of all of you all first. And and instead of finding a job, I decided to take a year off. And, being very hyperactive, you can't really take a year off. So I did a million things. And amongst them, I said, okay, I want to talk to interesting people. And what is the best way to talk to interesting people? And I was like, well, I can start a podcast. And I did. And within less than 18 months, I had 200 almost guests, over 1 million views, publishing on over 70 outlets within less than 30 minutes. So you come on my show, within 30 minutes, you're published on over 70 outlets. And this was all just a hobby to meet interesting people and then give back to the people that are sharing their very valuable time with me. So that's Story Samurai. And I don't charge anything from my guests. I don't take sponsorships. There is nothing that I'm trying to get in return except for the wisdom of my guests.
And what made you decide to call your show Story Samurai? My channel is called The Story Cure, and that was my TED Talk, was the power of storytelling. Why story?
So let's start with why samurai. 10 years of Kung Fu. So that's the samurai part of it.
Wow, very cool.
There is an element of the samurai that is very ethical and kind of protecting and serving community. So that's a part of it. And then why story? Because, when I was, I can't remember the exact age, I want to say early teens, I was a DM, which is Dungeon Master. And what that is, it's advanced or Dungeons and Dragons, right? And really what Dungeons and Dragons is, it's storytelling. So I would work for sometimes weeks, sometimes months to create, what we call an adventure. And what this adventure is, it's a story which the players, right, they play from start to end live. So they can make choices inside the story. But at the end of the day, it's a bunch of people sitting around a table, telling stories to each other. Now, I have my stories prepared, but they're telling their stories in reaction to my stories, right? So you've got the dungeon master, and then you've got the players, and we're basically spending hours telling stories to each other. And when I say hours, I mean 8 to 15.
I remember my brother used to play D&D when I was in high school, and they would just disappear into his room for a weekend. And I was like, what are you doing, you nerds? But I
Well,
never realized, I never had anyone describe it to me in the way you just did, Ari. I have to say that this is blowing my mind.
Look,
Nobody has
you
ever, I knew it was role playing, but I didn't realize the dungeon master created a story and then the
massive,
players were responding to that story.
massive
Nobody's
amounts of
ever
work.
defined it that way.
But you know, if you talk to any DM and you ask them, how much
Yeah.
time does it take you to create an adventure? And
Yeah.
they will say weeks to months.
Because you're writing a story, you're writing a book.
You're writing a book end to end. But here's the real kicker, right? The players can make decisions which mess with you.
So do they change your story? Do they change the outcome of your story?
Okay. So I'm lazy. So what I do is I plan a way that any decision that they make brings them back to the narrative.
Okay.
However, I have a friend, he's incredible. He plans out multiple branches. So the story can, yes, I was like, dude.
Oh, it's like a choose your own adventure.
Yes.
I loved those books when I was a kid.
Radical. It's radical. Like so basically a whole arm or a whole branch of his story can get cut off and will never be told because they made a choice.
Okay, slow down. You have got to give us an example. Those of us who were not, locked into our rooms all weekend as teenagers need an example.
Okay. So a little difficult, no preparation, but here's one example. Okay.
Revisit your past. Just take us back.
The dungeon master will basically describe a scenario, and each one of the players has a character. In the basic way that we do this, they know their characters, their skills, their abilities, their equipment, so they know who they are. What I like to do is add a twist where they don't know who they are. So there's a journey of self-discovery through the adventure. And what a better way to start than to start not only knowing who you are, but completely blind. So, 5 people will be sitting around the table and I'll be like, you wake up in a dark room. And now what do you do? So
what do you do?
What do you
do?
You
don't know.
So that's
and the characters usually, just again, for those of us who really don't know, the characters are usually like an elf or a wizard or a dwarf, that kind of, like very Lord of the Rings-ish, right?
Yes, classically, yes. That's the type I love. But it can be anything. There's cyberpunk versions, there's animal versions, there's robot versions. So there's all kinds of versions. I'm old school, so I like the classical elf, wizard, dwarf,
and then so your players are you're waking up in a dark room, but they don't know if they're an elf or a wizard.
They don't know anything about themselves.
Okay.
They need to discover, right? This is a twist that I do.
Okay.
They don't know what's in the room. They don't know if it have doors. They don't know what's on them. They could have equipment. They don't know what their skills are. They could have a
flashlight. They could have a torch or
they could know how to do magic.
Okay.
Right.
Right.
So then they start as like, oh, I search myself. Oh, you discover you have a sword.
Okay.
And then some other guy discovers he has a dagger. And it's like, oh, if I have a dagger and only a dagger, well, I'm either a thief or a wizard. So then they kind of like, they're piecing it together like, okay, who am I? And then they're like, okay, where am I? And as they're piecing it together, you suddenly hear a dark and ominous sound, right? So I add on to it and they're like, holy shit, where are we? Are we in danger?
Right.
So now they're going to, okay, let's secure the premises. Let's make sure everything's okay. Because it's a dark room. Like, how big is this room? Like, is somebody else here? Are there traps in the room? Like, could we die? And I kill people on a regular basis.
Do people collaborate?
Absolutely. So they initially always start working as a team, but there's always an asshole that screws the group at some stage. Always.
Really?
Always, because I set them up for that. I'm like, I give them difficult ethical choices. Because what is storytelling if not a method to convey an experience or a question? And many of the most interesting questions don't have great answers. So what matters is the question, not the answer. So then you see the struggle. So by asking difficult questions, you see the struggle, and then the group.
Oh no, you froze. Oh no, Ari, you froze. Shoot. Are you back?
I'm back, yes.
Oh, you froze for quite some time. Okay. I mean, we got that. Some asshole always comes and screws it, but you present these kind of ethical dilemmas, and then the interesting thing becomes the question. And of course, that's real life. Like, that's a good reflection of real life, right? I mean, if choices were always easy, light and dark, then life would be much simpler.
That is right. That is right. And we all together are learning about ethics, about problems. I bring in science, right? I'll bring in physics. I'll bring in history. So you bring in, because look, if you have to invent everything, it's really hard. So you lean on a lot of disciplines. So you'll lean on chemistry,
Mm.
you'll lean on physics, you'll lean on history of real places, you'll lean on real maps. Because if you have to invent everything, it would take years, not weeks or months. So I'll bring in a map of Africa or bring in a map of, some place. And then that terrain will then become the terrain that they play through.
That is so fascinating. I mean, I could talk to you about this for an hour, but I'm going to force myself to move on from the D&D thread
Fair enough.
because this is so fascinating to me. So you kind of learned to write stories through playing
Yes.
Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes.
And then when you launched your podcast, you decided to call it Story Samurai
Yes.
because
So that's the storytelling, right? The Dungeons and Dragons storytelling. It's the storytelling that made me, top sales guy. It's the storytelling that made me top product manager. It's a storytelling that has been the common thread that made me a great consultant. It's the storytelling that has really been the superpower in anything that I've done. And I kind of see that as the common denominator. So I'm like, okay, stories are a part of my life. Samurai is a part of my life. Story Samurai.
that is so fascinating. Tell us a story that you have used in sales or consulting in your business.
Okay. I've got one. It's okay. I'm sitting in the car. I am hungry. I am thirsty. I'm on the way to get the kids. This is a bad combination. As I pull up to the drive line, I see my two dumbass children completely ignoring me. I'm waving, come here, come here, come here. They're looking in a different direction. I open the window. Guys, come on. As they get into the car, I can see something's wrong. Something in my son's face is not just right. And despite the hunger, despite the long day, I ask him, Liam, is everything okay? I got to be honest, not my best parenting moment. It required a little bit of forceful coaxing to get it out. Turned out he was being bullied. Immediately, every single cell in my body wants to go and beat the shit out of that child. That's my lizard brain jumping up. Immediately, I'm thinking 20, 30 years back on me being bullied and how this is now happening to my son. Thank the Lord that we've moved past our lizard brain. And I'm like, okay, Liam, this is what you got to do. You need to give your bully a compliment every day. At that, he started to cry. The idea of giving a compliment to the person who's terrorizing him did not compute. I broke my son. And again, with some non-subtle, coaxing and forcefulness, I explained to him how you give a good compliment. It needs to be real. It needs to be genuine. You need to actually appreciate it. It means you need to notice the person and what they do. And you'd be like, and then you explain why it impressed you. And I walk him through the whole art of how you give a good compliment. And it's non-trivial. And, being not a great parent, I kind of forget about. A good parent would probably follow up, not me. About a month and a half later, give or take, I'm in the car again, picking up my children. And it was a good day. So I asked them, how was your day? Good day for me, being a good dad for a change. How was your day? And Liam starts talking about one of the friends, and I can see Emma, his sister's face, contorting. And then I'm like, whoa. And through the mirror, I see the mirror and I see their faces. And Liam says, Emma doesn't like the guy, doesn't like that boy. And I'm like, wait, what is his name? And then he says the name of the boy. And I'm like, holy shit. And I'm like, Liam, is that boy your bully? He turned his bully into a friend. He was playing with the bully. The bully is no longer a bully. The bully is now a friend. But girls being girls, they've got good memories. That guy's done for life. But Liam has now turned that person into a friend. Obviously, we, in retrospect, found out that, his sister later died. His mother is divorced. His father, the boy has been through the worst of it. And, that's hard. And he was, had an unhealthy outlet. But my son was able to take that toxicity and turn it into something positive. And I told him, Liam, at that stage, he was a black belt at Taekwondo. I said to him, Liam, you might be a black belt in Taekwondo, but really the art of martial arts, the art of the samurai is to turn an enemy into a friend. You are now a master.
Oh, what a beautiful story.
I was the proudest dad ever.
Oh, that is fantastic.
The art of storytelling. I don't know, but I won't judge myself, but hopefully that came across well.
It came across very well. It sounds like the opening to a TED Talk on how to cope with bullies.
So what's interesting is
really great.
If you kind of study the old and great how to make friends and influence people, these are basic tactics from the art of sales. So if you're teaching how to sell, if you're teaching how to do anything, right? Appreciation, if you're teaching how to be a manager, right? Or if it's a consulting deal, whatever it is, the art of appreciation is important. It drives value. So this is kind of a story that I've used a fair amount of times.
Yeah. It's very powerful. Very, very powerful story. Amazing. Tell us a little bit about, you know, those 200 interviews. What
Uh,
have you learned, or what have been some themes that have emerged?
let me with my cheek answer a slightly different question. How
Okay.
did it change me?
I
Because
love it.
it's done more than teach me stuff. It's changed me as a human being, and it's given me a skill that in 40 years I've never mastered. And what is that skill? It's how to listen. Now, this will sound stupid, but maybe some people will feel what I'm saying is like, I feel that I never learned how to listen in 40 years. And through almost 200 interviews, I feel like I can now actually listen. And I couldn't even explain to you before what listening meant. Like, people told me, you're not listening. I was like, well, I can hear you. What's the difference between hearing you and listening? And I just didn't understand this for 40 years. And I was walking with my son. He's hyperactive, ADHD like myself. And I was explaining to him now what it took me 40 years to learn this. And this is how you listen, Josh. And we go running at 5 a.m. because he gets into all kinds of trouble. So I need to tire him out at the beginning of the day. God bless hyperactive children and their parents. And a big apology to my parents for the shit that I put them through, because now I understand what it was like. I tell them, look, Josh, this is what listening means. You need to quiet your mouth. You need to quiet your head. You need to quiet your heart. And you need to quiet your body. And only when you've quieted those 4 things, then you can start to try to listen. It's like, well, what does that mean? Well, you need to quiet your heart. You can't feel strong emotions. You need to be neutral. You need to quiet your ears. You need to listen to actually actively hear what the person is hearing. You need to quiet your head. You can't be thinking about other things, and you absolutely can't be talking. You need to quiet your mouth. And for the hyperactive poor bastards among us, myself included, you need to quiet your body. You can't be fidgeting, because that's taken away from your attention. And only after you've quieted all your senses, then you can start listening. And when you're quieting your head, what you're doing is you're not thinking about the next question. You're in that moment. And I think we've had a trend, right, about being in the moment. That's a thing that's come up in the last, 10 years. And I only learned how to do that 40 years failing through the podcast. So if I have one piece of gratitude for what I've learned, it's from all of my guests. It's how to shut up and listen.
That's fantastic advice as well. And I do find that it's a problem. Yes, we've had a big movement of mindfulness, meditation, present moment. And yet I would argue that what I see is so many stimuli from our environment guiding us in the opposite direction, and watching people struggle with holding their attention on anything for more than a minute, and then you look at a lot of kids these days. We don't let our kids do TikTok or social media, but they can't even, when I think about like going to a movie when I was a kid, watching sitting through a 2-hour movie or a 3-hour movie like Gandhi or something like that. And then my children who they kind of don't like movies. They're kind of too long for them, but at least they'll still watch a show. And then you see this next generation. We sat next to this woman, a young woman on the plane. So it was a flight from California to Hawaii. That's a 5-hour flight. Plus there's about an hour roughly added onto that from when you get on, you're sitting in your seat, you're waiting to take off, and you're waiting to get off, right? So let's call it 6 hours. This woman was clearly in her late teens, early 20s. And she sat next to me, hunched over her phone, plugged in, bought the Wi-Fi, going like this, swipe, swipe, swipe through TikTok videos for 6 hours. It blew my mind, Ari. And I was like, how are you going to listen? How are you going to pay attention when you've trained your brain on 30 seconds or less stimuli?
I feel like every generation has its unique challenges to deal with. And for us, it was a different set of challenges. I think for my kids, it's a different set of challenges. And my daughter has social media on over 70 channels, 7 zeros, because she has her own podcast. And yet she doesn't have one social media app on her phone, not one.
Nice. So she's using
Completely.
it to produce and create content, not to sit there and swipe in every spare moment.
Exactly. So I
Okay.
kind of acknowledge that there's a double-edged sword here. Social media is
Yes.
an inevitable part of the future. In fact, I believe that social media is going to become more important because it will be a reflection of your reputation in the future. So I think there's a challenge here where completely rejecting it is a problem. That's why Emma, even though she's 11, She's publishing 2 books, and she's got 70 social media out. But she's not in any one of them. In fact, it's me coming to her and say, hey, Emma, look at how many people loved this thing. Because yes, when she goes to bed, she reads books. Actual physical, she's got a Kindle, but for some reason she likes the paper, so she does that. And I have to shout at her to lights off because it's 10 p.m. and she needs to go to sleep. But what is she doing? She's definitely not scrolling. She's reading a book. So I think it's you need to understand social media. You need to know how to use it, but it's got a dark nature that what I'm doing is also not okay, because I'm preventing her from it. What I really should be doing is teaching her how to resist, because when she gets to 16, 18, I won't be able to control her. So really, I need to create the knowledge and strength and resilience for her to use it properly. So I think that's what I need to, but she's 11, so I've got a few more years.
Yeah, I think it's still a little young for that, personally, is my feeling. But
Yes.
I agree. Ultimately, the role of parents, I think, is to coach our kids in understanding. And now AI, right? Because now AI is there. It's part of our life. It is not going to go away. It's going to become more and more integrated into everything we do. And I believe it's the same thing. It's not going to be, can I keep my kids away from an AI companion? It's going to be, do you really understand what this is? How can you use it? And what should you be careful of?
Yeah, 100%. So Emma and her group of, I don't know, 17 million friends are all on this Apple chat. So she didn't have an iPhone back in the time. So basically I'm like, okay, you can use my map. So I cut a deal with her, then she gets an iPhone. I'll tell you what the deal was in a second. And she gets an iPhone and she moves on to her account. Now it's no longer my account, but somehow I'm still on all the chat. So I can see everything her friends are saying and everything she's saying. I'm like, look, honey, if you ever want to have privacy, you need to get good with technology. And I told her, I can see every single thing you girls are saying. Now, if you want to get good, you figure out how to cut me out. You figure out when somebody who's not there, shouldn't be there, how to kick them off. And if there is somebody who shouldn't be there, to know that they're there. Otherwise, don't expect privacy. So, and we just saw a story, right, where a reporter was on, some social chat app, right, confidential, talking about a strike somewhere, drone strikes or whatever, and the reporter is on the group.
Right. I mean,
Right?
yeah, exactly.
So look, clearly our politicians haven't figured out how to do this.
Right.
But
Definitely.
So I told her, look, like, okay, you can have no privacy, you can make mistakes, you can get fired from your job, but I would rather you get good. So I think at the end of the day, this is what it's about. It's about understanding the world is changing and that you need to learn how to adapt inside this world.
How do you think that storytelling will play a role in this new world as we enter into more AI generated AI agents?
Yeah. So I think we need to so there's maybe 10 different types of worlds that could happen. And there's going to be a world in the next 10 years or so. We don't really know when. And then there's going to be the world that comes after that. So I'm predicting catastrophic failure in the next, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years. We don't know when it's going to start. We don't know when it's going to end.
Yeah.
And that's just because AI is going to create a whole bunch of redundancy. And corporations being incredibly greedy, what they're going to do is they're going to give the money back to the shareholders. But then at some stage, so what happened actually, you've got supply and demand, right? So you've got all the supply and demand stayed the same, and corporations are making a whole bunch of money, but the price went down. What is the price? In this case, it's either demand for employees or it's their salaries, both plummet basically. So this is going to be horrific. But then at some stage, right, it's going to realign and you're going to have adjustment of demand. What is the adjustment of demand? It's innovation. You're going to have all these new things that we're going to want to do. Now, I don't know how long it will take for supply and demand to readjust after the shock to the market. But what that means is that suddenly you're going to need a whole lot of more of innovative people. Now, with AI, do you need to be a software engineer in order to write software? No. Do you need to be, an expert in literature in order to write a book? No. You can just give your amazing ideas and you have a book doctor that costs $20 a month. Now, if your job today is being a book doctor, you might want to diversify and upskill. But if you are a person who's dyslexic, who has the most brilliant ideas and doesn't have the money to pay thousands of dollars for a book doctor, and it costs you now $20, now you've created a level of capabilities for yourself to bring your ideas to the world like never before. If you are a person in Africa who wants to revolutionize healthcare. For $20 a month, you can study, you can go through med school, right? And then you can create a app or mechanisms or tools or whatever that's going to bring your innovation to the world. So really what we're doing is we're democratizing human intelligence. And anybody can do anything, right? Including coding, including automation, all this stuff. So what we're going to see is both a huge increase in innovation from everywhere in the world, and a huge demand, because all these people innovating, guess what? They're going to be hiring. And guess what? All the companies that are hiring SaaS software, they're going to be like, no, let's just build our own. But wait on, if you're building your own, then you're hiring your own IT group as opposed to paying $20 a month to somebody else. So now we're going to see these, all these developers that are going to lose their job in the next, whatever, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. They're going to be rehired by people that never built software before. Now, if you remember back in the 80s, everybody was building their own software. They figured out it was too hard. And they're like, okay, SaaS was born. I think we're going back to the 80s paradigm of let's just build our own software. It's super easy. So now you have 100-fold, 1,000-fold more companies building their own software. So then here's the demand coming back, right? So that's one example out of thousands. But I think I would be overly optimistic to say, no, AI is just a tool. Everything's going to be great. It's not.
Mm-hmm. Where do you think that storytelling plays a role in that future? And let's talk 5 years. Let's not talk 20, because we don't know what's going to happen in 20 years. I mean, we could be living in this singularity, and there could be, robots building robots that, colonize the moon. So let's stick in the close future.
In this world where everybody can code, everybody can cook, right? The Gustavo world.
Yep.
You need storytelling in order to sell. You need storytelling in order to share with the world what you're doing. You need storytelling in order to provide your marketing, your sales, your consulting. If everybody is innovating, if everybody is bringing something new to the world, how do you communicate that, right? Now, everybody suddenly has a brand. Everybody suddenly has this narrative that they're bringing. Now, forget this new world. Even today, if you're a software developer trying to look for a job, you have no skills in communicating, and you're having an interview where you need to communicate your skill. Like that's sounding kind of stupid right now. Like we're trying to figure out if somebody's a good developer through can they communicate well, and if somebody's a bad developer but is a great communicator, did we hire the right person? So even today, in today's world, you need to know how to storytell. And what I'm saying is that with these empowerment that's coming from AI, there'll be so much more opportunity to use that skill to be successful. And I think that's the change. It's something that exists today. Great storytellers will be better product managers, better salespeople, better marketing people, better everything. And then in the future, even more so.
I think that's really an insightful observation, Ari. And of course, I agree with you, because I also think that part of it is just human connection. As we get more and more AI driven, right? There's going to be value in human connection, which includes storytelling, bringing people together around ideas. And also, I think a whole world of retreats and things like that that facilitate that. But to me, a core message of what I have done for the past 30 years is saying that everyone has a story. And that's also a core message of your podcast, which is part of why you and I bonded. And I always tell people, it's like everyone has a story, and that's your story. And I could see in that interview situation as well, when you bring something personal to the table, a bit of your background, a bit of your story, maybe a story of resilience, maybe a story, where you came from, if someone comes from an immigrant background, or if they come from having a social media following of hundreds of thousands when they were 11 years old. That is what's going to make them stand out, but it's also going to be what connects them.
Yeah, if we go back to the cave men and women, they connected through storytelling, right? It's so fundamental to the human condition, the human experience. And the more AI gets smart and integrated into our life, I personally believe the more we will thirst for real, authentic human connections. And I would argue, I don't know if this is true, some people can dispute me, but I would argue the ability to tell a good story, one that's true and honest and inspires and kind of gives you goosebumps. What an amazing way to connect with another human being, especially if you're being a little bit vulnerable, and showing that
Yes.
I don't think I'm perfect. Here's how I wasn't perfect. Here's how I learned from
Yes.
it. I mean, that's kind of the core of what we do as human beings. And I'll tell you, over almost 200 interviews, I have only had one person who I did not publish because they just did not agree to be vulnerable. They did not agree to tell a story. They just marketed their product and business the whole time. And I was like, sorry, this is not what we're about. And it only happened once. So my takeaway is everybody has at least one story to tell.
And I love that example because I feel the same way when I'm coaching people on writing their books. It's like, and not to make this a marketing platform for myself, but I do see the people who come at it with this, a little too much ego, a little bit of like, well, but I'm trying to prove how smart I am and I'm trying to prove how I'm the expert. And it's like, nobody wants to, damn,
Nobody
you're shaking your head. Nobody wants that.
Nobody wants that. Nobody. Look, do you want to put this out there and then for everybody to not read it, or do you want people
Right.
to be moved and for their
Yeah.
lives to be potentially changed, or do you want something that you will read and your mother?
Exactly. And I think that vulnerability is, I love that you use that word because to me, that is the essence of it. It doesn't mean you have to go and take your most traumatic memory of your childhood and share it. I'm not talking about that. That could be re-traumatizing. On the off chance that the trolls come after you, you don't need that. But you certainly have moments that you can share where you struggled, where you felt like a failure, where you disappointed yourself and others. And that's where the juicy wisdom comes from.
Yeah, 100%. About the trolls. The problem with trolls is they don't care about you until you're like a celebrity.
Right.
And by the time you're a celebrity, it's probably too late. You probably said too many things that you can't take back. But I hope this is true. I don't know if it's true, but I think that the trolls will come after you more for being, an arrogant piece of shit than for being humble and vulnerable. But maybe I'm wrong.
I think that's true. And I have a lot of authors who come to me who are worried about that, worried about the trolls. And I tell them the same thing. I'm like, they're not going to come for you till you're famous. When you're selling a few thousand copies of your book, those are people who want to connect with you and want to read you
Yes.
and want to learn something from your story. So they're not going to be overly critical. I've almost never seen that happen in my career. The one person who was heavily trolled was Ping Fu, and I co-authored her book Bend Not Break with her. So first of all, she was quite known. Like she was the CEO of a 3D printing company, Geomagic, and she was getting on, to the Today Show and Bloomberg and big TV shows. So she was quite big. She got a New York Times bestseller. And then the Chinese army bot came after her because she criticized China during the Cultural Revolution, and they just swarmed it and tanked the book.
Yeah.
And they generated the most one star. You can't give a negative review on Amazon. You can either give 1 star or 5 stars. The most 1 star reviews in history of Amazon. The good news is the book has since recovered. 15 years later. But that's the only time I've really seen an author get attacked for their book. So
There's look, I talk a lot about security, and I've got some of the top hackers and white hat hackers, I should say, on my show. There's nothing you can do if a government decides to target you. Absolutely nothing. Whether it's US or Chinese or any government, like you're in trouble. So there's probably nothing you can do. And does that mean that you should lose your right to speak freely? I mean, that's a difficult one. So I have deep empathy for this problem. I don't think there's a good solution.
no, good to hear. What else would you like us to know about you and your journey?
Oh, wow. So my daughter is publishing 2 books this year.
Bravo! I love that. Congratulations.
One is a book of poems. So she's 11 years old and writing poetry, and it's getting pretty damn good. And the other one is like this bird. It's like a cartoon, and this kiwi bird, an Australian kiwi. It's a very cute bird with a very long nose, and it's like upset about the environment, and it goes out trying to save the environment, and it burns down a tire shop on the way. And I was like, whoa, like that's like, how did she? I didn't help her with the storyboard. She just did it. And I was like, that is so brilliantly insightful and real world. And like, that's a mirror to society. And she's doing this and nobody's taught her. And I was like just blown away.
Mm.
So I told her, you wanna get a cat? And I've been saying no for years. Publish a book, get it picked up by an actual publishing house, not the big four, but like an actual like mid-market, and you'll get a cat. So she's writing a poem and an illustration every day. Yesterday, she patched up her storyboard to send it out to the illustrator. She drew her illustrations, but then the illustrator will kind of make it high quality because she's not yet, world-class illustrator. So she'll be publishing her book, Kiwi, later this year. Excuse me. And then my son, his target is to pass the bar before age 17. And the world record is 17 in like 8 or 9 days, something like that. It's a lady, I can't remember her name. And I'm like, okay, you do this and I will buy you a car, a brand new car of your choosing, and no more than $40,000.
Okay, I was going to say, are you sure
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah. That's still pretty pricey. I started
But
with
that's
30,
still,
but then he told me what he wanted, and I'm like, fine, we'll make it 40. And now this is basically a 3 to 4 year project where he's studying every day for 3 hours.
why the bar?
I don't know. Ask him. I was like, what do you want to do? It's like, oh, I want to be
Oh, so he picked it. He picked it.
Oh, absolutely.
No, that was, I
Intrinsic
just
design.
wanted to
Yeah.
confirm.
Yeah. No. There,
Okay.
I failed with that miserably. I was like, I will tell you what you're going to do. You're going to be a
Right.
programmer. You're going to do this and no.
Yeah.
I can't remember which guest on my show kind of introduced me to intrinsic design, called me an idiot for what I was doing with my kids. And I was like, that's interesting. And then the next day I was like, oh, what do you guys like? And then based on that, we came up with these new projects, which have like just gone through the roof. But it's all because I let them pick as opposed to what I was doing before. I forced my 9-year-old Emma back in the day to read Thinking Fast and Slow, which is basically a college level book. She was like, Daddy, this is terrible. I hate this. Like, no, crying. So yeah, I had some failures on the way, I'll tell you that. But yeah, I would honestly say that's my children's success is the most important thing to me. And it's honestly the only thing I would brag about.
Oh, it's beautiful. What a lovely story. I like that one too. Well, I really appreciate your coming to talk to me today, Ari. I think you're a fascinating human. I'm so glad we connected and appreciate you taking the time. Where can we find you and how can we follow your show?
Yes, so just search up Story Samurai with Ari Block. We're on 70 different channels, so you'll find one of them. I'll make a piece of advice that probably most of the listeners won't follow. Listen to the full episodes. Don't go on the short form social media. Sure, it can be 30 to 60 minutes, but listen to it from start to end, because the small, nugget of gold that is kind of, very limited that you'll get on the short form 30 seconds, 90 seconds social media is so lacking and missing compared to the 90 minutes or 60 minutes or 30 minutes. So listen to the full shows, ignore social media. And people tell me it's addictive, but unfortunately, most people don't do that. They just listen to the short form social media, 90 seconds, and that's their fix.
Right. And do you have one piece of advice, wisdom, knowledge, a thought that you'd like to share before you leave us today?
So there's one thing that I ask at the end of every one of my show, tell me the most difficult moment in your life. What advice would you give to yourself? So the most common piece of advice that I get from the most amount of people, and it's sometimes phrased and formed slightly differently, but this is something I'd like, first of all, I would have liked somebody to tell me when I was young and going through all kinds of horrible things. When I was 18, I was basically on the street alone. So what I would want somebody to tell me, and what so many of my guests have told me, you are not alone. Ask for help. There is a community. There are people. You are not alone. And, I think if more people would just hear that message and realize that it's true, world would be a little bit better.
That's a very touching message. Very, very, very true. Very true. There are always people who are willing to help and always people who've been in your shoes, always. So yeah, what a great piece of wisdom to leave us with. Thank you, Ari. I really appreciate your time. And we'll look for Story Samurai. Story Samurai, easy to remember. See? He's so good. All right. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.